Oh, yes, I know. You keep whispering it. Do you really want to know?
Really want to know.
Yes. Hello.
Well, hello. Good morning. And welcome to the Project Failure Files. Welcome to the latest episode. This is a series for anyone who manages people, projects, or processes for a living. I am Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smyrna Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk. And welcome to another episode where Sharon and I explore leadership and management topics from the perspective of what not to do.
So let me start with a question. When was the last time someone on your team said, "We've got a problem"? And it actually went well for them? Because today we're going to talk about everything's fine, right? And the danger of toxic positivity in teams.
It's those meetings where we've all been in them, where everything is on track, everything's looking good, there's no major concerns, right up until everything is not on track, nothing looks good, and there are major concerns. Everything just falls apart.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything looks perfect. It's kind of like an Insta family, right? It's an Insta business. It's Insta team where on the surface, like everything's super positive. Everything's, going swimmingly, but underneath, behind the scenes, people are like, well, I don't want to mention it, or they're keeping back concerns or avoiding tough conversations. And they're just kind of ignoring it and hoping it'll work itself out.
Mention it. Always mention it. I mean, that's the trap. It's the being too optimistic, and I have this problem. Focusing on the next steps and being positive and keep motivating people to kind of keep going. That's a skill that I have, but too much optimism can turn into denial, and once that happens, the risk is that real risks don't get surfaced until it's too late to really do anything about them. And so every project update, if it sounds too positive, we're only focusing on the wins and we're not talking about what's gone wrong. What do we learn about those experiences? Much less the problems with the next steps of what we need to do, then you're probably not hearing the truth. You're not, at least the whole story.
Well, and leaders kind of like they play a big role. They set the tone for this, right? Because if anytime anybody brings anything up, you dismiss it, or you minimize it, or you're like, now let's stay positive. Let's not focus on all the bad stuff. I think it does kind of teach people that they can't be honest. And I know a lot of times, I've heard this, oh, well, I didn't want to say anything, or I didn't want to bother you, or I didn't want to ruffle the team or whatever. And then what ends up happening is this kind of culture of we don't want to say anything.
Well, it's that phrase we've all heard, and sometimes we've felt that is like don't shoot the messenger. I'm reporting on you. Like, here's what we're aware of it. We need to take action around it. But I've seen people that have been persecuted because of that. I've felt like that, where people get angry, and as I always use that phrase, like be clinical about it. It's like, it's not about me. This is the project, and here's what happened, and it's a culmination of these other things. And yet, especially in the project management world, I know you've experienced this, that we've all experienced this, is that the finger goes to like, why didn't you do something? Like, well, wait a second. Like it's the wrong way to approach it. I don't want people to be overly optimistic. I also don't want them to feel like they can't bring up problems. The silence becomes the signal. I know that when people are fearful of bringing things forward, that's usually that signal, that sign that, okay, something doesn't feel right here. And that raises, there's a lot of tension. It raises other issues. Not because there aren't problems with the project, but the problem is that people don't feel safe to have open discussions.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to balance hope with honesty, right? Like, you don't want everybody to just be like, everything sucks all the time. Like, that's not, everything's falling apart. Nothing ever works. Nothing's going right. We're never going to win, whatever. And you also don't want to be like so positive that you're avoiding the problems. You've got to balance everything's going to be okay and we're going to solve the problems with tell me what the problems are so that we can solve them, right? There has to be a good balance. And I do think it's possible to build an optimistic culture and also create space for honest and realistic assessments, and they don't need to be in conflict with each other.
I've heard versions of the, like, for every negative comment made, you should reinforce with 3 positive. Like, I don't know what the right ratio is of the things that are out there, but there's truth to be told about if all you're doing is criticizing and never recognizing the things that went right, it starts to tear down motivation. And look, the strongest teams, the best organizations are the ones where people do feel comfortable bringing into the meeting saying, hey, this part isn't working. This stuff is working great. This one is not. It needs to be optimized. It needs to be improved. It needs to be overhauled, or we need to stop doing that entirely without worrying about backlash for even bringing up the idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the epitome of psychological safety, right? Is the idea that we're all here to work together. And I do think sometimes it's the idea of, if I bring it up, it's just going to go on a list and it's going to create more work for us to do, And so I think sometimes there's this idea of, well, I don't want to say it because then I'm going to have to do it and all of that. But true psychological safety is understanding as a team, we want to manage the risks. We want to keep control of what's going on. And we don't want to ignore the problems. We want to identify, here's the things we need to fix. We're going to make sure we know how to fix them. And we're going to feel good that we can bring those up so that they can get fixed. Because if you ignore the things that need to be done, it doesn't solve it. It doesn't make it go away. It just makes it more painful when you do have to go back and fix it.
Right. No, closing my eyes and or going on vacation. It's just a temporary fix.
Breaks are fine. Ignoring problems, not fine.
As always, this should be a great but candid conversation. We've got stories that we're going to share here. We'd love to hear your stories as well. Let us know your thoughts. If we miss a key point, you've experienced this, and what did you do to get out of this to kind of reverse the trend? Let us know in the comments. And let's get started. Let's get it underway.
Yeah, let's start with some definitions.
Yeah, so thinking about this, is some of our, I think, toxic positivity, which is kind of funny, that you saw some of the shared notes and stuff incorrect there, which is fine. I mean, but the toxic positivity, it's funny, when we came up and we talked about this problem area, added in. Yeah, I know. One, it's a great band name. Working toxic positivity. We actually created a sticker, and Sharon and I were laughing about this before recording, that I've got the little meme guy on there and says, excuse me for my toxic positivity. We
need shirts.
Right. We need shirts for that.
Positive.
But it's the problem with that is it's not optimism. There's a line between optimism and that and toxic positivity. And it's really that avoidance dressed up as culture. So when everything has to sound like it's on track, then the truth quietly disappears. So when I think of this problem, I just that's what I think of it. It's like people that are always trying to put a happy spin on things, and then they don't ever quite get to the facts of on the ground, the problems.
Well, and again, I think there's this idea that, if we ignore it, it'll go away. If we don't mention it, we won't have to do the work. You know what I mean? It's this idea of, if we just all kind of smile and act like everything's fine. And a lot of times this is one of those things where, you're rolling up reports to other people, and maybe there's, potential, layoffs or job loss, or you don't want anybody to kind of catch wind that you're not being successful, your team's not being successful, or you're falling behind, or that you've got major roadblocks, right? You don't want to bring those things up because you're concerned that might impact your job or your team's jobs. And so what ends up happening is we're not talking about people who are supporting their team through struggles or through, issues. We're talking about people who are literally just like putting the blinders on and saying, everything, don't look back here. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
It's just no, don't look over there. It's fine.
Sharon, my approach to this, I mean, I really do believe that it is more of a training issue. There might be like there's ways that you can handle this. I know we're going to get into solution things, and I just want to jump in and solve things right away. No, but how much do you think it is communication versus training around communication versus deeper cultural issues?
I mean, I definitely think it's a mixture of both, right? Because I think often when people come into our organization, they're trained on how to report. And if the way that they are trained is to report on things in a certain way and to not identify things, then they won't. It's like you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know better. And so I think part of it is training people on the identifying the risks in a way that can be tracked and managed later. And I think half of it is the culture to allow them to do that.
I kind of go that same direction. Like it again, if you outline the communication method, it should include the identifying the risks and the steps to be taken there. But if your team feels like they have to filter all of the bad news out before sharing their project status reports, you don't have a communication problem. It's a trust issue. Like there's a problem there that's been set by the leadership, by the management, that's not allowing that to happen. So that's why, again, when I say I think that you can solve a lot of this through proper training and structure of here's how we're going to report back to make sure that it is balanced.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you train people on the process, have a process, train them on the process, follow the process, right? That's step one. But then culturally, definitely set up a culture, like you said, with psychological safety, where we've now been trained on identifying the things that we need to identify, good, bad, or otherwise. And to your point, it has to be clinical. It has to be, here's the things that are working, here's the things that aren't working, and here's the things, maybe that, we need, have roadblocks or, need to discuss further or whatever. And then it's that cultural idea of saying, okay, we are going to identify these things. We are going to come up with solutions together. And then we are going to work as a team to solve them going forward. And I think if you don't do that, like you said, your culture ends up I think you kind of devolve, right? You kind of slowly just silence everybody and everything just kind of gets real quiet and real easy. And, the status report, right? Where people show up and it's like, how's it going? Fine. Any questions? Nope. Any problems? Nope. And when you go through this 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, 10 days in a row, and it's just like, I'm here and everything's fine and I don't need anything. Something's wrong. Everybody needs something most of the time. I would say once in a while, you should have one of those easy days.
It's not just that one word, teenager responses to questions. I feel fine. Really? No, it's people get in there and they start reading through the bullet points of what's coming next to the project. That's not what that discussion is about. We can all read the project plan. We can all look and see what's next. This is a discussion around how things are going. Hey, we're on track. Things are going. We anticipated taking 6 weeks. It took exactly 6 weeks. We're on budget, we're under budget, we're over budget. Here's why. Here's what's going on. It's that conversation.
And here's the parking lot of things.
Right. Here's everything else that's out of scope. Exactly that. And hey, we actually were under the timeline. We had additional time, some resources. We went and took one of those things off of the parking lot, off of the punch list of other nice to have items that were slightly out of scope, but we found a way to kind of move them in. No, but the impacts to the project structure and the culture of the organization, it really comes from and we talk about this so often, not identifying risks when you identify them. And so that's the concern, is that if you're not voicing concerns early, the problems don't go away. They actually compound. It gets more time intensive. It's more, there's larger impact the longer that you wait, the later that you resolve these issues. And so by the time a lot of those risks do fully surface, become a reality, they've usually turned into something that's far more expensive to fix. And why did we not talk about this? When did you see that? Why did you not bring this up? I've had those conversations where I made the mistake as a PM or I was leading a team. Like I've seen this again and again, and it just comes down to I remember having like a specific instance where I said, we need to do a better job with how we structure our team meetings. So I found myself saying to my direct reports over and over again, like, that's the purpose of this meeting. Like we're not going to attack anybody. Let's talk about here's what could be going on. And it was actually when they started realizing that we're on, like I'd always do the timeout, same team, folks. And I would set it up that way that I could see people got more comfortable and they understood it is a safe place. It doesn't mean we can't get angry that something slipped up or whatever, but direct it away from the people, the individuals. And I would even get angry. I would remember like to thank them for bringing it up, appreciate it. But it wasn't like my team that like screwed up. It was the outside resources folks that we had no control over their schedules. We only had their commitments and the breaking of their commitments.
So since this is project failure files, like assuming that, the problem is that we're ignoring things, we're just reporting up, nobody's really bringing up any issues. Like, what are some of the pitfalls you think that can happen to an organization if they just kind of keep ignoring things?
It's the fact that they don't eliminate risks. They get constantly trapped because they're not discussing them. Therefore, they're not catching them.
Yeah, I mean that can't possibly go badly for you down the road, right? I mean,
so what that does is that impacts. It has that domino effect on every other project behind it.
Well, every time you try to work on something, you're like, oh, this didn't get fixed, and that didn't get fixed, and this didn't get done, and that didn't get done.
And the trust of your internal or external clients decays as well. And so you say, it's going to take 6 weeks, which is a funny date anyway because of the movie. Money Pit, if you've not seen it, with Tom Hanks and Shelley Long, so good.
Yes.
It was 2 weeks for them.
2 weeks, yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
But everybody laughs every time they say, it'll take 2 weeks, and everybody laughs.
But I mean, think about it. Like, I can tell you so many times, and that I've been in organizations where there has been a group that just kind of, oh no, everything's fine. And then you go to do things and you're just constantly running into, well, what's the process? There's a process written down over here. It's 8 years old and nobody's ever done anything with it, but like there's a process. Do you follow the process? No. Well, then how am I supposed to know how to interact with you? Oh, well, you need to talk to this person. Well, that person's out on leave. Oh, well, then I don't know. Like it just creates havoc, and you spend, think about like how much time is wasted because there are different teams that have ignored things that could have been fixed. And because they didn't, and because they just put a smile on and they said, it's all good, that it never got fixed. And now all of a sudden, like everybody around them has to deal with that.
If every status update sounds good, then you need to be worried. But what's not being spoken? Real projects have friction, sometimes almost constant friction somewhere. You're pushing against, the three main factors of project management: time, budget, resources. And there's friction across those things. And I always say that you need it faster, then I need more money and or more people. If you need more people, it's like, all right, here's the time frame, here's the budget around those things. I mean, you're constantly managing those things. So if you're not hearing about this friction, it could be that you're on one of those projects that seems too good to be true. Maybe it is just be flawless execution.
Have you ever been on a project that's ever been flawless?
Not flawless. That's a pretty high standard, but I have been on projects, shorter projects
that have been well run.
That we've done it before, And so everybody kind of knew the handoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it went very well. I mean, I think of it, a great example, like I would say, again, flawless, but in organizing some of these community events, like community days, the old SharePoint Saturdays, things like that. Some of them that we did, like with the organizing team, because we'd been worked together, we've done it multiple years, it went flawless. We all knew our roles. We went and did it. It worked out beautifully. But real world projects, I mean, that's something where we didn't have a project. There's not revenue on the line for that, people's jobs. It was a volunteer community event. So probably not the best example there. But it means that usually when that happens, if it seems like it's going too well, you're probably not getting the whole picture.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I find on every single project that I'm ever on, whether, no matter kind of what role I'm in, there's always kind of this idea of things that didn't get said early on. And, because it's, let's just keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving. And I remember one project I was on, it was like a year-long project. And we spent a lot of time at the beginning. I put people in rooms and I'm like, look, you need to tell me every single possible problem, because I don't want to get 9, 10, 11 months down the road and find out that, we've got this problem that we did not identify and manage to. They just brainstorm and brainstorm and brainstorm and brainstorm. And so we did the entire project. We get 10 months down the road. It was a gigantic migration project, and we move all this stuff over. And I mean, I had notes upon notes upon notes upon notes of things to deal with, right? So we managed to every single one of them as much as we could. We get to 10 months down the road. We migrate everything. Okay. Yeah. We send out all the notifications. We take the old system and we put it on read-only mode. We didn't even shut it down quite yet. I get an email. I'm not even kidding. I get an email. When were you going to tell us you were going to turn this off? This is a critical, this is a critical system that did not get moved over. And I'm just like, have you been under a rock? You've been, and the people who owned it were in every meeting, in every conversation. And they were just like, yeah, we're fine. Everything.
Which means they weren't paying attention.
They were clearly not engaged.
It's not right. It's not an alignment, like lack of alignment. It's like, this is from a governance standpoint, that governing body, that project meeting, you are asking people to come prepared for those meetings and to be actively engaged during that. So if their eyes are glazed over, if they're clearly reading through other emails, then they're not engaged with it. And I would say that, hey, inaction on your part, that means that you agree with the decisions that have been made.
Well, we moved everybody else. We shut down everything else. And we just did like a little private baby project for them to finish it up. But I'm just like, this is just it. Like, you show up, you smile, you nod, everything's great.
Yes. Yeah. Well, let's talk about overcoming this issue. So it's training issue, it's a communication issue, it's a culture issue.
It's a doing it issue.
Yeah.
What's that? Get it done, right? Just do the thing. I think a lot of times, you can train people and you can support them and you can say it, but then you really have to, as leaders, I think we really need to say, hey, let's put that on the list. Let's write that on the backlog. Let's bring up the risk. Let's make sure we have a plan.
Isn't it funny how you go back to the process? It's the process, stupid. It kind of is with this. Not that we're not proposing bureaucracy, but getting organized and capturing this and making sure, again, that there's balance between the positive. You want to have the positive things, because I think far too many teams, too many organizations, managers focus on everything that's gone wrong and don't spend hardly enough time on what went right with the project. Yep. And so it's finding that balance. But for a leader, I'd say that you can start by changing how you respond to bad news. So if your first reaction is to be defensive or dismissive of the whatever being brought forward, people are going to stop bringing you the bad news. They're not going to share their fears. They're not going to identify risks as openly. So you're going to lose visibility fast. So you need to, if you make it part of your documentation, part of the process. It's part of the status reports. And there's that balance there. And that you then talk about each side of those things. That might be a good approach. So you can structurally change how you're reporting on projects, and that will resolve a big chunk of that. At least that gives people the leeway to know there's space for me to raise these risks and concerns and then to talk about them.
Yeah, no, I think that psychological safety thing is a key element. And we've kind of talked about process, but I would say, another really tip for success is, as part of that process, have a defined task or a defined part where you're not just saying, is there anything you need to bring up? It's more, what are the concerns, or maybe even pushing everybody to have one thing that they add to the list. Like, I think from a process perspective, it's not just calling it out, but it's really encouraging people to make sure that they're doing it. And not only not kind of like telling them to simmer down, but also encouraging them to add to that list and encouraging them to say, what are the risks? What are the issues? Right. What are the concerns that we need to bring up? I think, when you encourage that, it's like, we're not telling people we want you to be negative. We're telling people we want you to identify the issues that are keeping us from being successful. And I think that's a very different thing.
I just thought of that. There's remember this, there was a leader who was very mindful of this. And people, if you just kind of open it up, there's anybody identifying any risks, have anything they want to talk about kind of thing, it's still difficult to bring that forward. But what this leader did, which I thought was really smart, is did like around the table, like tell like one thing that went well with this project or the last week, and then did the same thing. What one thing that went wrong or that we should be better prepared for, kind of thing. They did it during like the post-mortem. It needs to be much earlier than that. Obviously, you can't just be talking about what went wrong at the end. But part of that is just, making it clear. So finding ways to pull that information out of people. That's part of what a leader needs to do. And so you can do things like say, okay, I want to there's 7 of us sitting around the table. Everybody share one, like, what's your biggest fear, the risk that you see with the project in its current state, and have everybody bring something. So everybody's saying something that's potentially negative. That's a great way. As long as they don't say something like, I think the biggest risk is that I just care too much.
Yes.
Like, no, don't use that one. It's mine. It's mine.
I think bring those things up, and also, bring a potential solution. And sometimes you don't know.
Always.
That's okay. Right. But here's one of the issues I see, and here's a way I think we can solve it. Allows you to kind of go beyond just being negative, right? Like, instead it's, hey, I'm identifying this issue, and I'm also identifying maybe a way that we, 1 or 2 different potential ways that we can solve it. But then I think as a leader, if you're then having that discussion, but then as a team, you're differentiating between, thank you for bringing this up, let's work together to come up with a solution, and we're gonna solve this. I think that demonstrates for them the way that you can lead optimistically without just being like, oh yeah, let's just not mention that.
Yeah. The name of which we do not speak. We will not bring this up at the project. No, but I think healthy teams, healthy organizations normalize the friction. It's just part of the discussion. So they expect issues. We all expect issues, whether we talk about them or not. But they talk about them openly. They treat them as part of that progress report. Here's what's going on. Here's what's going wrong. Here's what I'd like to do different. I think it's completely healthy to even phrase this right way, like to call out people that are slipping on due dates or commitments or other things. Like, we're falling behind. The engineering team committed that they're doing it. Okay, this is here from the engineering team lead. What's going on there? Well, we thought we had these resources, but these other 2 projects are encroaching. So we're not fully on this project C yet. We're still working on A and B. These things, again, that's the kind of discussion you should be having, not harboring anger about somebody who somehow is doing something intentionally because it's you. I'm not saying that the world is against you, because sometimes when the world is against you, it feels like appropriately the world's against you. But when you say it, you sound crazy.
But I think that goes back to the forming, storming, norming, performing thing. And we don't talk enough about that, is that, I think a lot of people stay in the forming because it's easier and they don't have to get through the storming, but you really have to get through storming to get to the other side so that you can normalize and feel safe around that so that you can be a performative team.
Right.
And if you don't go through, it's almost like, I've managed multiple teams where one of the things that I'll come in as a consultant and my job is to make the team perform better. One of the things I will do is throw some bombs, because at the end of the day, the faster they can get to storming, the faster they can get across and get to performing. And I think what ends up happening is we do get stuck in that forming stage and we never get over that hump.
Psychological safety, which again, I want people to feel safe in their role, but it's not about making people feel comfortable. It's about making it safe to be honest, even when the message is inconvenient. I think about past company, Boston-based, Woburn, Massachusetts-based company, where they were very passionate, very, very vocal, and I felt at home there. I remember being in our VP of sales office and the CEO's office and like raising my voice and, different people yelling about different stuff. And it seemed like we were really angry. And in fact, dealing with the product team and yelling that they should be working on stuff. Anyway, having those conversations. I remember somebody who was visiting the office, he's like, wow, it's really rough. I said, no, we're fine. We went out to lunch after that. We're like, we're yelling at each other. And then just like pause for a second. It's like, you want to go grab sandwich orders? Like, where do you want to go? Let's go to this place over here. And we're fine, still in contact with many of the leaders from that organization. No, but we felt comfortable enough and safe enough that we could wear our passions on our sleeves and speak our minds. And it wasn't in a destructive way. It was just, the louder I said it, the more I felt I was communicating.
And you're just being open and honest, right? And you felt good and you felt safe around the people to be able to be open and honest.
Yeah. Well, as far as call to action, so what should people take away from this? What would you have people do? What would you have us do, Sharon?
Well, I definitely am going to reiterate. I think that if you are in a position of leadership where you're able to kind of change the culture and change the way that people function, I would really encourage you to make sure that at any sort of status reporting, whether that's a stand-up or whether it's, a meetup or whatever it is that you're doing, that you're encouraging every member of that team to identify anything that's potentially in the way of your team being successful on a regular basis, and almost to the point that I feel like you should reward that so that you're getting as much of that identified, managed, and scoped as you possibly can.
It's almost like I've mentioned, an important part of that 4-blocker layout for status.
There's a whole section for issues and risks, people.
Right. That's what I don't need to go through the detail. If you've watched every other episode, I talk about that. But
don't just talk about what you did.
Yeah. But I love that idea too. Just find a place in those status meetings at some point to ask and have everybody provide feedback. Like, what's not working?
Mm-hmm.
Project or process or people or whatever it is, what's not working, and then give people space to respond to that.
Yep.
And I think if you could create one moment this week where someone can raise a concern without pushback or spin, then that's the right direction, because the cultural change that needs to happen, because ultimately this is a cultural weakness for too many organizations, that they don't allow this kind of discourse. There's concern. There's a hypersensitivity to not saying anything that could hurt somebody's feelings. BS. It's just, you can't operate that way. All you're doing is keeping important information from reaching our ears. That cultural change, it doesn't change entirely through policy. It changes on your activity and the reactions to that and being consistent. So it just means For me, if I've got a template for the status meetings where I've got my 10 questions that I go through at and I can have them written down until I have them memorized, but that I followed that and it includes surfacing those concerns, then hey, whatever works for you.
Yeah. I think the only other thing I would add is maybe as a leader, as a manager, if you notice yourself, maybe there is a squeaky wheel and you've kind of tuned it out. You've become a little nose blind or a little ear blind to some of that stuff coming in, and you find yourself just kind of brushing it off and being like, oh, I don't want to mention that, or I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to say it. I don't want to, feed into it. Maybe think about why. Because I think as leaders, sometimes we do get a little bit focused on trying to maintain that positivity. And you still want to be hopeful, but just, maybe notice where you're overlooking some of those things that could be being brought up.
Yep. Well put. Everybody, thanks. I think that's a wrap for this week's episode. Please be sure to follow us and subscribe. The recordings, of course, will all be available instantly as soon as we're done with this. It's just there out on youtube.com/Project Failure Files. You can also subscribe to the Substack newsletter, which eventually I'll go write another note out on there, but you can go subscribe to that. It'll continue moving forward. Yeah, thank you for participating again this week.
See you next time.
Every Monday. For the rest of our lives, sort of. Yeah. We'll see you later.
All right. Bye.